This Week in Post, unscripted, uncut, it's a live edit. Hi everyone, I'm Scott Davenport and welcome to In Post. Today is a live edit, live in air quotes. What live means here is I'm going to go post-process a photo I've never worked on before. And so you're going to ride along with me, bumps, bruises, mistakes, and scratching my head, all that kind of stuff all along the way. Before I dive into the photo, really quickly, there are still a few spaces left in my San Diego Coastlines workshops for March and April of 2017. I think there's one space left as I record this for March and 2 in April. If you want to come shoot with me in San Diego, pop on over to my website. Check it out. It's blatantly obvious how to get to the workshops page if you hit my website. And hope you can join me in San Diego. So to it, I've got a photo here. I just came back from a week in Oregon as I record this. And a bunch of different photos. And I wanted to get started on some of them. And I thought, why not do one of them as a live edit? So turning to the screen here, this is a view from an area called Sisters Rock. And this was taken middle of the day, but the light was really interesting. And it was predominantly a scouting trip for me. But I thought this was really nice, and as I was taking it, I thought that this could either be something with some muted colors or something done purely in black and white. So I've got the photo loaded into Lightroom. Let's get going. First things we'll do, some obvious stuff, collect corrections. Actually, it looks like Lightroom turned that on for me automatically, and I can already see some dust spots and so forth. Let's go ahead and just take care of leveling our crop. Do that right along that line of land. There we go. Now dust spots. Q key, A key, so I can see those spots pretty easily. Let's pop that up even a little bit higher. Yeah, there's a few more up there. This was about, I'm going to guess, 2/3 of the way into my trip. And did a lot of shooting at the ocean in dusty conditions. One of the days I had was incredibly windy, blowing a lot of sand around. So it does not surprise me that I've got quite a number of spots up in the sky there. So that's better. We may see a couple more that peek themselves out as we get going here. A few other distraction type things, a little bit of some muss at the bottom here. If I just take the eraser or the retouch tool. Wow, where are you getting this from, Lightroom? I do not understand why you choose locations like that sometimes. So let's try that again. Maybe I'll just wiggle it a little differently. No, it's still going crazy here. Let's zoom back out. Where are you choosing this from? Way over here? Should be a lot closer. Let's get back in there. That looks much better. Lightroom 0, Scott 1 for retouching. Let's just adjust that a little bit. Looks like I'm missing a spot there. I'm going to have to... Oh, I see what's doing. It's cloning. I have this on clone. Heal. Let's do heal. So there you go. Our first little roadblock there. Again, Lightroom is choosing something wildly out in left field. Let's see. Now, as I look at that, change the feather on it. Size it up. Yeah, it's still not doing a good job. This is an area where Lightroom tends to struggle. It's very good for spot heals. It's not so good when it comes into things like more complex choices here. Let's try one more shot. I'll give Lightroom one more chance. That's better. Now let's just change its reference point so we're not getting that big rock there. Maybe change my center of where I want to do my replacement. Lower our feather some. Lower the size some then. Gosh, you're making me work hard for this one, Lightroom. I'm almost at the point of giving up and saying I'll go into the photo suite for this one later. Let's see. We're going to call that good enough. Now, dare I attack this other one here? Let's see. This little spot down here on the beach where I was, clipping a little bit of the grass there. Let's see. Yeah, let's go ahead and give it a shot. Q key one more time. You're choosing the beach. We don't want that. Let's choose something over here. Another higher. That's kind of messy. I don't like it. You know, I'm going to leave that, and if the only reason I bring this into another tool like Photo 10, it'll be to clean that up. All right, let's get on to the more basic things. So I kind of, well, before I dive into this here, what do I want to do? I like the misty feeling of it, so I don't want to add too much contrast or dehaze things too much. I like that mystery that's going on, even over on the left-hand side with you know, the hills being a little bit you know, soft and covered. And I do like that it's a pretty muted scene. I am wondering about the greens. If the color were to come up some, but not entirely, what would that look like? So we're going to take an easy hand, I think, on our basic adjustments here. White balance as shot. Let's just try auto and see if there's much of a difference. Warms it up a little bit. I think I'll take the warmth over the coolness. Now exposure wise, we're good. We got a nice looking spread on the histogram, so I'm not going to change that at all. I will tweak black and white points, so we'll raise up the white point, back that off until we're not clipping. Same thing for black. There we go. And now we can raise shadows a little, not a lot. I don't want to open this all the way up. I like the level of contrast that's there. And a matter of fact, I think I'm just gonna leave the shadows where they are for now. And even the highlights. Looks like it's telling me I'm clipping somewhere. What did I do wrong there? I don't see where I'm clipping. I must have just adjusted. I went down to 14 instead of 16. That was enough. I'm not clipping there anymore. We'll add in some contrast. And that's going to richen those shadows some. And I honestly, I like that. I think this is a good scene for it. Now that I've enriched the contrast some, tweak that up a little bit more. This area is a little dark. What if I start to adjust shadows now? Ever so slightly, just a little bit, not a lot. And if I need to do anything more, I might even do it with a brush. All right, clarity, some, maybe just a tiny touch. If I go too far, I'm going to lose some of the softness in the water, and I'm also going to lose that misty feeling on the side of the coast there. You know, so it takes off the edge a little bit in these areas, adds a little crispness around the rocks. But otherwise, this is still looking really nice. Let's see. Now, vibrance. This is going to be an interesting one because you can see where I'm raising this vibrance up. We're really starting to, I'm cranking this beyond normal. Getting lots of that green to pop up. But it's also showing up in the ocean and the rocks and, you know, the tools, you know, looking for color and trying to find things to make more vibrant. It's interesting what it's doing to the shoreline. Not the shoreline, the shore, but I don't like what it's doing to the water. So this would be something, if I decide to go into a color route, I'm going to do that somewhere else, not in Lightroom. My masking tools will be better in other tools. I think I'll just leave vibrance and saturation alone. So now the decision point. What do we want to do? Do we want to stick with the more monotone muted colors? Maybe do something in split toning? I have some presets I've been putting together for split toning. As I hover over them, it changes the preview up here. And so let me try one of these. It's okay. I don't have anything that does anything particularly with greens, which is kind of what I'm thinking about. Now I'm gonna not do anything with split toning. And I think instead, I'm going to bring this into On1 Photo 10. Do a little more retouching work on those distractions along the edges. And then play around some with greens and seeing about bringing up some of the color on the shoreline. And seeing what that looks like. And if that doesn't work, I'll do something black and white. So on to Photo 10. We'll take this over. I'm going to right click, edit in. On1 Photo 10. Where are you hiding? There you are. And I'll see you on the other side. All right, made it over into On1 layers, and let's grab the eraser and start doing a little cleanup. Zoom in. First thing I want to take care of is this this little bit on the beach here. Like that. And this should be very light work. I'll do that. I'm going to use the clone stamp instead because of the texture in the sand. Make that smaller. Pretty healthy feather. There we go. Okay, I'll option click to sample and then kind of sweep over that. That's looking better than what the eraser is going to do. That's because of that texture in the sand. All right. What else? I don't mind the footprint trail that kind of just leaves a trace of humanity. That was actually another photographer I happened to bump into while I was out there. That's cool. Let's see. Back to the eraser. I think the other thing I'm going to do, and this is really kind of nitpicking, I'm going to sweep away this one rock. Let's zoom in there. And the reason is this just feels a little bit like a repeating pattern. And it's what was there. It's what was real. But you know what? I just don't want it. So undo, redo. That looks good enough. Okay. Zoom it out. Anything else to tidy up before going into effects? No, I think otherwise I'm pretty happy with this. So turn that onto a smart layer. I always save after I'm done working in layers, and that's mainly a force of habit. I was like, it's like checkpointing my progress. Now we'll go into effects, and we'll probably start with contrast, dynamic contrast, and then start to play with the greens here. So let's go ahead and do dynamic contrast. Now I don't want this everywhere. I only want it on the hills. So let's start with protecting sliders. Let's protect the highlights entirely. And let's also protect about half of the midtone. So something like that. Before and after. It's still adding more in the water than I would like. So let's go even higher on the midtones. Before and after. No, it's still too much. All right, we're going to do some masking then. Let me bring that back down so I get more of that punch in the midtones in the hills. But we will do some quick mask work. So quick mask, let's get a pretty tiny brush so I can weave in between these rocks here. So I'm going to weave through here and kind of get this lazy brush stroke going for this whole area of water here. Let's let do that. So talk amongst yourselves while the quick mask goes forth and masks. All right, pretty good. O key to show me what it did. Pretty good, pretty good, pretty good. Okay, let's add to it. I'm going to do a tiny little sweep in between here. I'm being careful not to touch the rocks. I just want that mask to touch the water. And the quick mask is kind of an additive learning tool, so you can see it filled in a lot more of the ocean. That's great. Okay. And then we'll grab the refine. Now refine only works on mask edges, so I can make this really big and just kind of do this and say, all right, smooth all of that out. That's what I'm fundamentally telling the refine mask to go do. I have it in paint out mode. You can see up here at the top. And so it's saying now I want to remove that dynamic contrast from these areas. So it'll have the effect of expanding the mask a little bit to fill in some of those areas. Now this might take a bit, so I'll pause here, and if I need to accelerate the video, I'll do that so you're not watching a progress bar the whole time. All right, it came back, O key again, and it did a better job filling in spaces on the ocean. It did some stuff up in the what do you call it, the hills there I don't like, so let's go ahead and clean that up. I'm going to press Command R, that turns on the perfect brush. I can kind of, whoops, I got to switch it to paint out, do that, X key. Now I'm in paint in, so I'm going to get that dynamic contrast put back in there. Go ahead and do that. And it kind of doesn't really matter so much for the sky because that's all in the highlights range, and we're already protecting that area. We get this protect slider all the way up. This is more important for those rock faces to make sure that I'm not removing any contrast from the hillsides. Once I get around the edges here, I'll switch off the perfect brush so that it will work more quickly. And now it doesn't have to think about edge detection. It can just go and mask. And so as I'm painting through here, I'm thinking, in the end, I'm not sure if I saved myself anything by using the refine brush. I may have just been better off going in with the masking brush to begin with and kind of just getting those areas I needed to around the rocks that are in the ocean. But there we go. That's good. I guess the one thing I can say is the refine brush gave me a smoother edge on some of these masks. All right, now this is still a problem. I got to fix up these rocks here. So let's bring the contrast back in on those guys, on these guys. Couple of clicks around those. Yeah, this is turning into more work than it should be. So I think the next time around, if I've got that much refine work, I will stick with skipping refine and doing it with the brush itself. Okay, that last one there, and right there. Okay. All right, so with all of that, what do we have before and after? So we're adding a pretty healthy punch of contrast there. A little more definition to the hills in the background, but we're still keeping that misty feel with the protect sliders. We can play with the settings. Let's see. That's way too much. Let's bring that back off. I think I'm going to switch back to, if I hit natural, it's going to reset my blending mode, so I pop those back up too. I'm going to stick with that. That was effectively where we started before I started playing with sliders. So that's pretty cool. Let's now do a little color work. And I really want to focus on those greens. So color enhancer, and let's pull in the green enhancer. Now, what is that doing to the scene overall? It does seem to be adding a green cast everywhere. And I certainly don't want that. I really only want it on the hillside. So, go into the mask, we'll invert it. Now this is removing the color effect from the entire scene. And so we can see where we're painting. Let's get really over the top with the saturation. I'm going to invert that again so you can see what I mean. You can see all this really, really rich green here. Pumping the saturation up really high there. Invert that. So I'm removed the color. Have my perfect brush. Size is good. Or sorry, feather is good. Let's make the size big. I'm going to start painting this in just around these foreground, side ground. What would we call this? Just around this area. Let's hit our O key so that we're not going to get into the rocks that are in the ocean, and I'm not going to get to those background hills. I just want to do it on the main parts of the mainland, I guess we would call this, the mainland. There we go, click, 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 and I'm just doing a few taps or clicks with the trackpad here. And turn that off. All right, so what is that doing for us before and after? That's adding a lot of green. Now we're going to dial that back some. Dial back the saturation. And this is really, I'm at the point now of, do I want to go in this direction or not, is really the question. And I think my answer is going to be no. I'm not going to take this in a color direction. The rest of the scene doesn't have enough color. I could start to play around with, well, maybe throwing it toward blues a little bit, well, because the ocean is blue, but I've got a long exposure here. I'm seeing mostly the foam that was on the ocean, the churn from the breaking waves. And the sky itself is pretty overcast. The sun was starting to break through, and about an hour later it finally did. And so you get the yellow of, it was really close to high noon, honestly. But that's just not going to work for when I took this photo, at least in my opinion. So I'm going to abandon the color. I'm going to get rid of the color adjustments. It's not worth it. And instead, I will actually tweak up our contrast a little bit more, because I like a lot of punch and contrast in what's going to become a black and white photo, or at least it's going to become a really darn close to black. Let's see. Black and white filter. That's a pretty standard one. Let's go ahead and do color response. Start with auto. Not much difference. Okay, not bad. Let's add a little more contrast and a little more detail. The detail's nice. It's a nice pop there. I think I'm going to back the detail off and use the dynamic contrast filter to increase any final details that I might want. Now, when I bumped the contrast up, the shadows certainly got deeper, and that's okay. That's not so bad. I'm also starting to notice that the job that Lightroom did on those spot removals, as I'm recalling, I think I had it set to clone originally, and that's a problem there. So I'm gonna need to clean that up after I'm done here. Or in all reality, if I end up really liking the image, I'm probably going to go back to square zero, start with getting my spot removal done right, and then go back in and reapply some of these edits for a an image that would go in a portfolio. But we're in the middle of the live edit, so we're going to have to work with the mistakes we've made and solve them along the way. So let's see. What else to do here? I might want to also increase the highlights some. Again, I like to have quite a bit of contrast there. I think, the play of bright and dark. What else? I'm going to go back for detail somewhere else. I don't think I want to tone this anyway. I'll take a quick peek at them. I usually tend to love the selenium because I like that darker plum colors that it puts in the shadows. But for this scene, gold might be nice. I kind of like the classic look of really just a silver tone. So let's just stick with none. No toning there. I don't want any grain. I'm not a huge fan of grain. It depends on the photo, but yeah, generally I don't do it. Let's try taking another look at this before, after. Oh, I am struggling here. I'm going back and forth again now, because now when I go back to this color version, I'm seeing some of the nuances of color. I'm seeing a little bits of yellow in the highlights. I'm seeing little bits of greens in the midtones and shadows. Let's try this. All right, we're going to go back down to dynamic contrast. So right now all we're looking at is dynamic contrast. I'm going to add a split tone filter. I looked at split tone earlier, but I wasn't really thinking too much about it. And for the highlights, I want to do a yellowish tone. And let's get something soft. Maybe something like that. Okay. And for the shadows, actually go toward the greens. Now, again, I also want something green, but something soft. All right, something like that. Now, I have more shadow than highlight. Let's start backing off the effect on the shadows. So start increasing the effect on the highlights and start playing with the balance. So this will send things more toward the shadowy areas. This will tend things more toward the highlights. And where do I want to end up here? Let's cut the shadows and slowly bring them up. More in the highlights. How is this working for me? Is this doing anything for me? It's too much. Back off the opacity some. Before and after. Before, after. Before, after. I'm sorry if this is starting to bore you. I am just really struggling to decide, do I like this or not? And I think I'm going to keep it. I like the little extra play, but I do feel I'm going overboard on the greens. So what about switching the balance some? It's more green, that's less green. And I'm just clicking back and forth, kind of using this as almost a A/B testing. Which one do I like? Which one do I not like? Around there. I think I'm going to settle there. Okay, so we're going to keep the split tone. The black and white filter I'm going to delete. And I think the only other thing I'm going to do is a little bit of dodging and burning, because I'm losing a little detail up here. And I want to bring in maybe a little bit of hints in highlights over here. So let's use an adjustment brush And I want to be very targeted with this. I only want to apply this to highlights. And let's start with the brightness is high at 70. Okay, fine, lower it down a little bit. Maybe add a little bit of warmth, kind of preload this brush with some settings. And this will be an experiment. We'll kind of pass a sweep through here. All right, so that's what we've affected. Now what's going on? Anything? Range up, range down, brightness. I'm barely noticing anything at all because there's not a lot of highlights in there. Let's go ahead and apply it to all, but then protect the shadows and start to protect some of the midtones. I'm not going to get targeted enough with this adjustment brush. We'll try one other thing here. Let me turn this back on. Reset the mask. Let's go ahead and create a luminosity mask. Okay. And invert that. So right now the brightness, you can watch, I'm affecting the shorelines and things like that. I don't want to darken it. I want to bring it up a little bit and adding a little bit of warmth. And maybe this is where I'll start to play with that vibrance some. What is that done for? Before and after. So it's brought up the brightness over here a bit. I think the other thing I will do is I'll use this opportunity to raise up detail just a little before and after. All right, not too bad. For this area here, I think maybe the next best thing to do is, again, go to an adjustable brush. I want to darken things. Not a whole lot, but for now I'll use that. Create the brush as big as I possibly can. I have the feather as big as I possibly can. I'm just going to do a single click. Okay. Undo one more time, but right about there. Now this is horrific, understood. But now we're going to start fixing the strength of that brush and how much power that's really providing there. And is this worth anything at all? Applying it everywhere, we're darkening. No, this really isn't making much of a difference at all. Let's get rid of it. And anything else I want to do with this highlight area? Maybe I'll just leave it. Let me take a, I'm going to lean back from the monitor here for a minute and take it all in. Before and an after. I'm going to keep this the way it is. I think I'm going to leave that as it is. I am going to bring this back into layers now and clean up this mess that I created by not paying attention to my tool settings in Lightroom. So I'll apply these changes. We'll get back over into layers. And to be non-destructive, I'll go ahead and duplicate the layer. Now I need to take my duplicated layer, make it into a simple layer so I can use the retouching tools. So let's get up into here. Yeah, we can see those horrible circles. Looks like I even missed a couple there. So we'll get the eraser. We'll take care of the first 1, 2. That's actually not looking so good because of a bit of the no, I don't know what to call this, pixelation. Just, you know, the fact that there was fog and things sweeping around in here. So I'm going to go back to that clone tool and do it with a clone instead. And my feather, pop that up a little bit. Sample. Kind of just jiggle through there. Sample here. Jiggle through there. Sample over here, come in from that side. Sample over there, come in from that side. Maybe even come in from the top a little bit. And this is just to blend it all through. Now that's a lot better. That's not having that same obvious, this is where you did a single click of a spot removal and it doesn't look right. Here's a couple of other ones. So option to sample there, option to sample there. Let's go ahead and get in at 100% on that area and see if I can find where I did that. Looks like there's a little bit of action of something going on up here. Option click. All right. Okay, I think we're going to call that, as far as for this photo and given this mistake I've made, this is where we're going to leave it. And yeah, so I mean, let's see, beforehand, what we had in Lightroom was straight out of the camera. Was this is my PSD, isn't it? Okay, I need to get to my raw file. So this is what came out of the camera. And then afterward, this is with a little bit of stylization, mainly that split tone to kind of give this an interesting bit of color cast, a greenish yellow type tone. And it's growing on me. I'm kind of liking it. I might play with this a little bit more, but mainly so I can go back and correct those dust spots and do it right the first time. I think that's the tip of the week. Make sure you check your tool settings when you're doing your spot removal. You want to be healing when you need to be healing and cloning when you need to be cloning. Well, that wraps it up for what turns into a pretty epic live edit. A lot of wrong turns on this one. But, you know, I hopefully this is valuable to you because you can see it's, you know, the smaller videos you get, you know, when I've targeted things and this is what I've done. I did A, B, C. There's a lot that goes into some of those choices, and I don't have all the answers when I'm sitting down and working on the image for the very first time. I don't know if anybody does. If you do, you're awesome, and I wish I were you, because then my editing would be so much faster. But that will wrap it up for this weekend post. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please leave a comment, shoot me a question, any other way that you can let me know that this was valuable to you. And until next time, my name is Scott Davenport, and happy shooting. And so I'll sip coffee while the refine mask is masking. Refining.